Earlier, I spoke to Politico White House reporter Gabby about where the president's search goes from here.
We know that the president was looking at 5 contenders for this position, which he said yesterday. That means that right now there are at least 4 others in contention for chief of staff. Based on our reporting at Politico and others, we know that Robert Lighthizer, the U.S. trade rep, is one of them. Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is also under consideration. White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney remains under consideration. And of course, you mentioned earlier, Deputy Trump campaign manager David Bossie is somebody else who has met with the president in the last 24 hours, who has spoken with him about this role and remains under consideration.
So if you were to be a gambling woman at this point, who do you think has the lead at this point?
Oh, it's so difficult to say, and I've asked multiple sources, both inside the White House and on the outside, who are close to the president, and really none of them are willing to say that there's a definitive front runner, because of course the president is so likely to change his mind at any given point throughout this process. As we've already seen, he was seriously considering Mark Meadows, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and then a day later Mark Meadows was announced to have been more of an asset on the Hill, and President Trump said that he removed him from consideration. So there are a lot of people right now who are looking at this. They're hesitant to really name a front runner. They don't really know if the president is even leaning in one direction. What we do know, however, is that the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, his daughter Ivanka Trump, they are really playing a crucial role in this process. They're helping to vet candidates, they're making suggestions, and really what it comes down to is whether or not the chief of staff gets along with the president, has a good relationship with the president, but also gets their seal of approval.
All right, I want to ask you about David Bossie. What do you think he would bring, and does he really have a real chance?
He does have a real chance. He's under serious consideration based on our reporting. We have heard that he's looked at because he has sort of the shrewd political savviness that President Trump is looking for right now in a chief of staff. Of course, he's going to be heading into a very difficult re-election campaign. He's going to be facing an onslaught of Democratic congressional investigations. And so to bring somebody in who has not only Capitol Hill experience, Dave Bossie was involved on Capitol Hill for a number of years, but also has campaign experience, having served as President Trump's deputy director during the 2016 presidential race, would be sort of an asset for him. That being said, there's a number of people within the White House who are really hesitant to bring somebody like Bossie in, primarily because of the relationship that he has with Corey Lewandowski. Lewandowski was the Trump campaign manager for quite some time during 2016. He was ultimately fired in July of 2016 and replaced with others on that team, including Kellyanne Conway. But he's just sort of seen as this unsavory figure in Trump world still, and particularly by the president's daughter and son-in-law. And Bossie's close proximity to him is creating problems in this race for chief of staff.
Gabby, your recent reporting suggests the president might actually consider splitting the job into 2 positions. What do we know about that idea?
We've heard that the president is looking at sort of creating a chief political advisor role, so somebody who would take on helping him navigate through the re-election campaign, deciding what his schedule would look like, where to campaign, how that all will focus on, or how that all will square with what he has to do day to day in terms of his duties as president, and then also bringing on a chief of staff who would act in the traditional capacity as chief of staff, running the internal West Wing operation, making sure that the president has a chain of command in place, making sure that the access to the White House is limited, all of these things that General Kelly sort of did during his tenure, but that a new chief of staff would have to oversee as well.
So given the investigations by Robert Mueller, by the Southern District of New York, the incoming investigations by House Democrats, is the president concerned about finding someone who has legal and congressional expertise to help him manage the fallout?
Well, it would certainly be a plus to have somebody who has that expertise and brings that background to this role. And that's one of the reasons why Chris Christie was under consideration to begin with. He was a federal prosecutor in New Jersey for a number of years. He has that legal expertise and that experience. And so I think that's one of the reasons why he was really looking at Christie to bring on not only as his chief of staff, but somebody who could also serve as an in-house legal counselor in some way. none of the other candidates that we know of had that background. As I mentioned before, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, doesn't. Robert Lighthizer doesn't. Jared Kushner, who has also been floated as a potential chief of staff candidate, doesn't. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily a must-have in a chief of staff, but it would have certainly been beneficial to Trump to have that in his chief.
So we're also about a week away from a potential government shutdown. Any signs that the president's budging on that threat to shut down the government if he doesn't get money for the wall?
Well, the White House Press Secretary, Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley told reporters this morning that the president is dug in on this issue, that he is not looking to compromise, that he thinks the American people want and need border security, that they want and need a border wall. And so that is what he's focusing on. That being said, what we're hearing from Capitol Hill is that Republicans really don't know how to move forward on this. They're having a difficult time deciding how to proceed because they haven't yet received a clear signal from the president. So while he might be telegraphing that he is extremely focused on getting that $5 billion figure in wall funding, he hasn't yet communicated that to Republicans on Capitol Hill, and that's creating some difficulty in figuring out where this negotiation stands. Gabby,
thanks for joining us from the Politico newsroom.
Thanks very much.
There are some new developments in the president's search for a new chief of staff. According to the New York Times, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has taken his name out of consideration. Christie had been a top contender and is the latest potential candidate to withdraw his name. In his statement to the Times, Christie writes, "It's an honor to have the president consider me as he looks to choose a new White House chief of staff. However, I've told the president that now is not the right time for me or my family to undertake this serious assignment. As a result, I've asked him to no longer keep me in any of his considerations for this post."